Hello, everybody. Before I get too far into the year, I want to wrap up the books that I read for December 2024 and January 2025. As I mentioned before, I want to do wrap ups kind of individually. I don't know if I'm ever going to do something like this again necessarily. We'll see. I'm just kind of flying by the seat of my pants at this point. But it would be unfair to not talk about the books that I read from front to back from both months. I read three in December and only one in January because I was kind of in a funk and I just needed something short and sweet to get me through that final push in the month. So I read one book in January. And as usual, we're going to start with the lowest rated book on the list, and that is Las Posadas by V. Castro. This was a novelette set around Christmas time. Nola is a telenovela writer. She visits this town to purchase a house for her mother, where she meets the local mortician. He invites her to a puzzle club where she hits it off with him, as well as his friends. And the romance in this book is so hot and heavy, so fast. Everything in this book went by so fast. There are vampires. It sounds like a really fun, exciting book, but I could never really linger on any moment because each scene just zipped past my face and I could not catch up. I think I read some reviews that said that they would probably have DNF'd this had it not been such a short book. But personally, I feel like this book could have used a bit of an extension, maybe at least 100 pages. When it was done, I didn't know what happened. I almost forgot the book as soon as it was finished. But I will say that I do see V. Castro's name a lot coming up in a lot of people's reviews and wrap ups. And I would not be opposed to reading something of hers that is much lengthier. The next book that I read in December is Burn This Night by Alex Kenna. This was a 3-star read for me. It was fine. It was a book that wasn't initially on my radar at all. I picked it up honestly thinking that this was Alex Kenna's debut, just because I haven't heard anyone talk about her before. But it turns out this is the second book, I believe, in her Kate Miles series. Kate Miles is a private investigator. And in this particular story, she discovers that her father is not her biological father. So in the beginning, she kind of starts off searching for some relatives. I think she does a DNA test. It's been a while. I don't remember everything, but I think that she either does that or she goes on Ancestry, like an ancestor website, and she finds somebody. The setup for this story, like the murder investigation, both past and present, she finds out that the person that she connects with is tied to a cold case. It's a little bit too convenient. It's like, go figure. How everything is set up. This was a fine book. It progressed relatively well. There was this character named Jacob, whose perspective we enter from time to time. I wish there was a little bit more commentary on Jacob because he was imprisoned for a time. He's an addict. And I feel like there could have been a conversation around how people who have been to prison before, once they're released, they walk into this stigma in the outside world. You know how in America recidivism is so high, and it's because a lot of prisoners aren't offered the resources or enough resources to get them back out there, keep them steady, hold them up. I am very much an advocate for that. I've never been to prison, but I know some people who have talked about their struggles coming back into the world. It's a very deep topic. It's a hard one to talk about, so it's not necessarily something that I would expect Alex Kenneth to put into her book because it is a little bit of a complicated subject. It's not talked about a lot uh, or enough in books. I haven't really read a book that featured that. So when I saw the premise and I got an idea of who this character was, I kind of expected that in this book. But like I said, it was fine. It wasn't, it was inoffensive. It didn't make me angry or anything like that. There were a few plot conveniences, but otherwise, it was an okay read, and I would not mind reading more about Kate Miles in the future. I might just go back and read Alex Kenna's first book just to catch up because I jumped in the middle of it. And the last book that I read in December is Annibot by Sierra Greer. This was her debut, and a lot of people have talked about it around BookTube. So I gave this book 4 stars, but if I'm being honest, it is one of my favorite books of 2024. I would recommend that people read it. There are reasons why I gave it 4 stars. I might have to talk about this book a little bit more in a future video, but for now, I'll just tell you this is the story of Annie, who is a robot. She is a Stella. I believe that's the brand name of robot. She's created specifically for Doug, this man who's just awful, to perform certain duties, some domestic, some in the bedroom. You learn over time that she's not all that great with the domestic tasks, cleaning, household chores. So she participates in the other more often than not. But in this story, because Annie is autodidactic, she's learning as she goes. She only knows what Doug programmed her to know. She only knows how to please him. So while I don't believe that this book is sci-fi, I picked this book up because it was marketed as sci-fi, but I wouldn't give it that genre label. Even though Annie is a robot, I think, of course, everything in this book is intentional, but I think creating Annie as a robot is intentional in the fact that in real life, we oftentimes have to recognize abuse and patterns of abuse over time, and who we are focusing on, whether it's someone else or ourselves. We have a tendency not to put ourselves first in certain situations, but a lot of times other humans don't see that, and we're judged for not seeing the sign sooner. With Annie, it's a bit more, quote, forgivable because she's a robot. And I think that people who are often quick to judge could afford to read this book and understand that real people go through these same steps to process what they're feeling. It's a great read. I enjoyed it. Like I said, it's 4 stars, but it's one of the best books. I don't think that the star rating diminishes the impact. Certainly a conversation starter. There's so much in this book that I could spoil, but like I said, I might just have to talk about it later. Great debut by Sierra Greer. I certainly recommend you pick it up. And lastly, we have Cicada by Sean Tan. This, I was going to say, is a children's book, but it's an ageless book. I think adults could learn from this because Cicada is a corporate employee working alongside humans, which I didn't expect. I thought that this was going to be a world where, different insects work together. This cicada, this cutie pie, is so underappreciated at his office. He feels like an outsider. He feels different. He works hard. He puts in the hours. He does more than, honestly, he needs to do because he's just so undervalued by his coworkers and his boss. You feel for him, because I feel like we've all been in that situation. Some of us are still in that situation. It's not easy being treated as an outsider, as other, devalued because you don't fit the mold It has a repetition and a rhythm that I think is memorable, very well illustrated, 5-star read. If you're interested in a picture book that follows you from childhood to adulthood and you can understand it no matter where you are in life, then this one is a good one too. If I've convinced you at all to pick up any of these books that I read in December and January, their Goodreads links are in the description below. Click on those. Head on over to your library or use your library app if they are available. If you enjoyed this video for whatever reason, do leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Otherwise, I've been Jim. You've been great. Happy reading.